Hello. So for my 5-day unit plan, I decided to do a unit on the first two colonies that were founded in America, Plymouth and Jamestown Colony. And I decided to choose this just because it kind of has to do with Thanksgiving, and I've been in the fall spirit lately, and we can make this lesson about anything we want. And I'm a science teacher, so I don't actually teach social studies, so I just wanted to do this because I just like it. So, for my first day of the lesson, I'm going to have the students do a simple mapping activity so that they can kind of get the geographical lay of the land of the 13 colonies and understand like where it was that these colonies were. So the learning target is I can use maps and other geographic representations to analyze settlement patterns in the colonial era. And for the launch, I'm going to ask students, what impact do you think the physical area we live in has on us? So, for example, what impact does living in Kentucky have on our lives? And have them respond and think about it. Maybe talk about it at their tables. And then for the actual lesson, I'm going to give a mini lesson. So that's one of the techniques that I chose to use because I just think mini lessons are probably a lot more engaging for students because they don't have to pay attention for long periods of time, and we know they have short attention spans, so the smaller you can make it, the better. So I'll give a mini lesson on the different physical geographical features in North America, like the difference between North and South geological features. And I will also give a mini lesson on just like maps and how we read a map, important parts of a map, like key, scale, labels, etc. And then after I've taught about that, I'll pass out a blank unlabeled map of the 13 colonies. And I'm going to have students use their Chromebooks to look up a completed map of the 13 colonies and use it to fill in their map. So they have to label each colony with its name and the year it was founded and color each colony a different color. So then their formative assessment for this will consist of an exit slip in which they describe the differences in physical geography between the northern colonies and the southern colonies, making sure to specifically state which colonies are considered northern and which ones are considered southern. So they must also include in their explanation how this geography affects each respective region's subsistence. So like how does living in the rocky north affect what they're able to eat? And how they're able to live, what houses they live in, things like that. And how is it different for those living in Jamestown, which is more southern, more fertile land, things like that. So that's the first day. And then for the second day, I'm going to have students partner up. One partner will be working on the Plymouth colony and another will be working on the Jamestown colony. So I will give them articles about their respective colonies, which will be found on ducksters.com. So I will also pass out a note sheet for them to record information about their respective colony. So it'll ask them to fill out things like what country financed the trip and why, what area of the United States was the colony in, who established and led the colony into the New World, why did people choose to go, what was the geography of the land like, how did they find and grow food, what did they eat. So they will record all that information based off the article that they are reading in their notes page. And then after they have learned all about their own colony, they will go back to their partner and the partners will teach each other about the colony that they learned about. So, for example, if they research Jamestown, their partner researched Plymouth, they will then be able to have all the information about both colonies after their partner has then taught them about Plymouth. So they'll record all the information about what their partner is saying as well about the other colony. And then their formative assessment for this lesson, it will just be a simple Google form with 2 questions. So the first question will be identify the main reason why the Jamestown settlers came to the New World, and the answer is gold. And then the second question will be identify the main reason why the Plymouth settlers came to the New World, and that's religious freedom. So that is that lesson. And then for day 3, I'm going to have them do an experiential learning activity. So that is the technique I chose. And I really liked reading about this in the textbook because I feel like a lot of times social studies is just, it seems to be like a lot of reading or like teacher lecturing, things like that. And I feel like students are more engaged with hands-on things, but it's kind of hard to do that with history. But I learned about this activity or just experiential learning in general, and I really wanted to try it. So I'm going to show the students various paintings of scenes from colonial life, such as Landing of the Pilgrims, Landing of Jamestown, etc., and ask them what they think is happening in the paintings based off what they have learned so far about the colonies, and I'll guide them toward the correct answers. I'm really going to try to get them to put themselves into the settlers' shoes and imagine what life would have been like at that time. And I'm also going to show them photos of real artifacts that are like in museums right now that are actually from Jamestown and Plymouth, like clothing, furniture, pots and pans, guns, whatever I can find, etc. And just ask them to do the same thing, kind of put themselves in the settlers' shoes and imagine what they think life would have been like. And they're going to talk about that with their table groups, and we're going to have like a class discussion about it. And then the main activity for this day, the actual experiential learning activity and the formative assessment, is going to be a journal entry. So I'm going to have them write a journal entry of one day in the life of a settler that lives in either Jamestown or Plymouth. They can choose which colony they want to do. So they're going to pretend like they're a settler who lives in that colony, and they're going to write a journal entry on notebook paper. It needs to be dated appropriately. In the 1600s, it has to state which colony they live in and should be about a page long. So they're going to talk about how they spent their day, how they're feeling. They're going to reflect on why they decided to come to the New World, if they're happy with their decision or not, and make a prediction for what the future will bring. So I really like this activity because it actually is like, it puts them in the shoes of the people who experienced this historical event, which is kind of hard to do. Like a lot of times social studies teachers, I feel like, struggle to do that. So I'm glad that I learned about this in the text that we read. And that's going to be their formative assessment too, the journal entry will be. So they'll just get points for each aspect listed above that they are required to include. So they'll get points for it being long enough, points for including how they spent their day, for how they're feeling, for why they decided to come to the New World, for if they're happy with their decision, and for making a prediction about the future. And then day 4, I'm going to have them do more of like an artistic activity to kind of give those kids who are artistic a creative outlet. So that is also going to be their formative assessment because this is kind of a bigger project that I'm going to have them do. But I'm going to have them make a brochure for either the Plymouth colony or the Jamestown colony, and it's meant to be sent back to England to advertise the colony and convince other people to come live there. So I'm going to give them paper and crayons, markers, colored pencils, whatever they think that they're going to need. They're going to fold the paper into thirds like a brochure, and they have to include the following items. So their brochure has to include an attractive cover page, illustrations, information about daily life in the colony, a map of the colony, and provide incentive or reasoning for people to want to move there, such as gold or religious freedom. And there shouldn't be any blank space on the brochure. So I'm going to give them the entire class period to work on this. And I will walk around the room guiding them as they go, observing them, answering any questions that they might have. And then the formative assessment is just going to be the brochure itself. So it'll be worth 50 points. They'll get points for including all the required elements. So 10 for having a title, cover page, 10 for including illustrations, 10 for talking about daily life in the colony, 10 points for a map of the colony, and 10 points for providing incentive for people to want to move there. And it's not going to be graded on artistic ability, just that the fact that they tried to include, they used markers and crayons and tried to make it colorful and that they included the correct information. So, yep, that's day 4. And then for day 5, they are going to do a self-assessment of that brochure that they created the previous day. So I wanted to use the self-assessment reflection technique because I feel like a lot of times kids don't get to do that for a lot of their assignments. It's like once they've turned it in, it's done, it's over with. And I like the idea of reflecting back on an assignment that they did and improving it where they can for a better grade. So I wanted to use that in my unit for sure. So I will pass back their brochures And the rubric that I'm going to be using to score their brochures, they'll have a copy of that to look at. And I'm also going to give them a self-assessment paper where they will record the score that they give themselves for each aspect they're required to have in the brochure. So using the rubric, they're going to record what they think that their score should be. So, for example, title page, that's one section. Did they include it? Did they partially include it, or is it not there at all? So for each section they'll be able to give themselves a score of full credit, partial credit, or no credit. And then for illustrations, are they there? Are there just barely a few of them, or are they not there at all? Information about daily life in the colony, is it there? Did they just briefly say a couple words about it, or is it not there at all? Etc., etc. So they'll do that for each aspect that they're required to have in their brochure and give themselves a score. And then they'll also have to explain why they gave themselves that score. So if they gave themselves full points, what did they think was, like, why did they think that they deserved full points for that? Like, what did they include? How did they include it? And then if they gave themselves any less than full credit, they have to explain how they're going to improve their brochure in order to receive full credit for that section. And then once they've completed the self-reflection form, they're going to actually implement those improvements that they said that their brochure needed. So for the rest of class, they'll be working on those improvements, whatever improvements they think that their brochure needs. And then the formative assessment will just be the self-assessment page where they fill out what score they give themselves and explain why they gave themselves that score. So that formative will just be graded based off of effort and completion. Like, did they put forth an effort to actually and truly self-assess themselves, or was it just like to get the assignment done? So that'll be their formative for that. And that is the last lesson in my unit plan. So thank you for listening. That is all I have.